Marciello, and I'll spell the last name. It's Marciello. How's that? So that's my name. Now I've been living in Melrose since '78, well before you guys were born. But I grew up in Boston. I grew up in the North End. So I'm not a native Melrosian. I just came here in '78. So who are you?
Saeed?
Saeed? Saeed? And you're from Melrose?
No.
Okay.
I live in Boston.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I grew up in Boston. I love Boston.
Nelson.
Nelson, you live in Melrose?
No.
No.
I'm living right here right
Yeah,
now.
right now.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. And yourself?
Joshua.
So I got Saeed, Nelson, and Joshua. You're a Melrosian.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so like I said, I grew up in Boston. So my first experiences with veterans was my own family. See, my father was a Navy man in World War II, and he was in the South Pacific, and he worked on a boat called a PT boat tender. So, what would be a PT boat?
PT boat?
Yeah. Nelson. Oh, you're Nelson.
Yes.
Josh, PT boat.
Like,
I don't think they have them anymore.
like a scout boat or something?
Yeah, good guess. Wrong answer. Saeed. Okay, have you guys ever seen or know about a book written by President John F. Kennedy called PT 109?
Yeah, I think I heard of that.
Yeah. So President Kennedy, who was assassinated in '63, he served in World War II in the South Pacific. He was skipper, I think, of a PT boat. So a PT boat is it's patrol torpedo. See, you think torpedo, subs launch torpedoes. But surface craft, such as a small PT boat, had two tubes and it launched torpedoes. And its mission in the Second World War was to hug the shoreline of islands, waiting for Japanese ships to come along and scoot out to them and fire two torpedoes and blow them up. That was its job. My father was on a PT boat tender, which is kind of like a mothership. PT boats were little tiny little craft, big enough to launch torpedoes, but they had to go to the mothership to get resupplied. Or if there was battle damage, the mother boat would fix them. So my father was on a PT boat tender in the South Pacific in World War II. My uncle was on an anti-aircraft battery. So anti-aircraft would be what? Long tubes pointed to the sky, designed to shoot down incoming planes, right? So they stationed my uncle in Texas. Now, go figure. Why? Why would you have anti-aircraft tubes pointing to the sky I think he was in Galveston, which is a coastal city in Texas?
Because Japanese bombers?
Yeah, did we ever have Japanese bombers bomb on our mainland?
They bombed Hawaii.
They
Pearl
bombed
Harbor.
Hawaii, but not continental United States.
Yeah.
So they feared that German bombers would somehow come up across the Atlantic, come up through the Caribbean, and bomb American cities. So we had our cities protected. Over here in the North End, when you cross over the Charlestown Bridge, there's a huge factory building on the right. There used to be anti-aircraft guns on top of that building because the Navy Yard was right across the way there. And they were afraid that German bombers might come across the North Atlantic, come down through Newfoundland, Canada, come down and bomb our Navy Yard. So we had anti-aircraft gunners everywhere in the States. So then my uncle was sent to the Philippines in 1945, and as he was going over with his boat, the Japanese surrendered. So my uncle went to the Philippines for a while, and then he came back home. A second uncle was with the Army in England, and his job in World War II, he was with what's called logistics, loading and offloading ships that came in with supplies. So while I had a father and two uncles in the in the Army and Navy, I also had family on my Italian side who fought for the Italian military. One was in the Italian Air Force and another one was in the Italian Army. He was captured in North Africa and sent to a British prison of war camp. He escaped from the prison of war camp. He fled through Sicily back to the mainland, and he never went back to the war. He was smart. So I had family on both sides of that World War II. Now, nobody in my family, to my knowledge, nobody served in Korea, the big conflict in the early 50s, of the mid 50s. However, my brother in '67 went into the Marine Corps, and he spent time in Vietnam, and he saw combat in Vietnam. At this time, I had just entered college, and I decided I wanted to join the Marine Corps, but I wanted to be an officer. So I applied for officers training program, and they refused. They said, no, you can't join. I says, why? They says, because your eyesight's not good. So my eyesight's okay, but it's not good enough to become an officer. So they rejected me. So then I decided in college I wanted to join ROTC. So do we know what ROTC is? Told you I wasn't going to let you sleep.
What?
What? No. Do you know what ROTC is?
No.
So ROTC is a program where certain colleges offer it. If you go to college and you want to join the military after college and be an officer, you would go to this training program in college, and when you graduate it, you become an officer. You'll be commissioned a second lieutenant. So I applied to ROTC at Northeastern University. I was going to Boston State at the time, right up the street. And they said no. Well, why not? They said, well, you don't go to Northeastern University. I said, so what? I go to 15-minute walking distance. I can just come, and you need people because your program doesn't have a lot of people, because a lot of people were protesting the war and when they were staying out of ROTC. They said no. Okay. So around this time, I graduated from college, and I said, you know what? The war in Vietnam seems to be winding down, and I'm starting a new life now as a college graduate, but I still want to be in the military, so I joined the Army Reserves. Now, what is the difference between the Army Reserves and the National Guard? Who am I going to ask that question of? Saeed, what do you think? I mean, you may know, and I don't expect you to really know, but do you think there's a difference? You know there's something called Army Reserves, and you know there's something called National Guard. So is there a difference? Do you know anything enough about them?
Reserves,
Yeah.
like the backup.
Yeah. And so was the National Guard. They're back up too. So, Josh, any ideas as to what might be differences between the Guard and the Reserves?
Guard and reserves. Reserves might go out of the country, maybe?
Yeah, so does the Guard. A lot of Guard. The guys from the 182nd Infantry over here in the Melrose Armory just got back from Afghanistan. So the Guard goes overseas too. But that's good. Nelson, any ideas? No. Okay, so the difference is that the National Guard basically belongs to the state and can be called up by the governor. So National Guard is used for state crises. For instance, the Hurricane Sandy just came through. So the governor called up some members of the National Guard to be on standby in case of damage from the hurricane, or to move people in case of flooding. So and then the National Guard is used for riot control, for flooding, major disasters. We had a very, very, very serious fire in Chelsea about, 25 years ago. It destroyed dozens and dozens and dozens of houses and people. They mobilized the National Guard to go into Chelsea to patrol the streets to prevent looting. Looting is what? Bad guys go into people's houses and steal their stuff because they know the people aren't there. That's looting. So they mobilize the National Guard for domestic, local issues. National Guard is also trained to go to war. It's like our boys here in Melrose, they just got back from Afghanistan. National Guard trains up what I call trigger pullers. infantry, and tank guys. Army Reserve, the Army Reserve is controlled at the federal level. The governor has no control of the Army Reserve. Those are a separate set of reserve forces like the National Guard, only they focus more on medical, intelligence, other areas that the Guard doesn't focus on. So each has different training. So I joined a reserve unit and in 71, and in 76 I switched units. I joined an intelligence unit because I like intelligence. We all like intelligence, right? It's better to have intelligence than not, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Saeed?
Yeah.
Nelson? Better to be smart than not, right? Because if you're smart, you know what's going on, right? If you're not smart and you don't follow what's going on, well, you know, it's just going to come and fall on your head. And you're never going to see it coming, right?
Yeah.
But if you're smart and you see it coming, what can you do?
Stop it?
You could duck, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's better to have intelligence than not, right? And sometimes you got to work hard to get it, right? Which means you got to study hard, right? Because you just don't breathe it in, right? So I joined an intelligence unit, and they sent me to special schooling, and I learned to be an interrogator. So what does interrogator do?
They
INTERROGATOR. 2 R's. INTERROGATOR. Interrogator. So what's an interrogator do, Josh? You were going to say?
they get information out of people.
Nelson, what do you think? What's interrogators do? What do you think is interrogation?
Interrogation?
Yeah. That's serious questioning of somebody. If a cop arrests you, what's one of the first things they do?
Interrogation.
They interrogate you. Did you do it? Why did you do it? When did you do it? How did you do it? If you didn't do it, who did it? They interrogate you, right? That's what you do in the military with prisoners. You interrogate them to get information from them as to what is coming at our troops. See, why? Why do we interrogate prisoners? Because here's us on this side of the line. Here's the bad guy on that side of the line. The prisoner came from that side of the line. So he knows what's going on the bad guy's side. So when we capture him, we interrogate him to find out what's going on the bad guy's side so we can be ready in case they're launching an attack or they're going to launch an attack or they're strengthening the line here. So we know what's going on. So we have interrogators who interrogate prisoners. Right? Got it? Now we know that with the war on terrorism, lots of bad guys are being captured in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, different countries, and being taken to Guantanamo in Cuba to be interrogated, right? Especially after they launched the attack on 9/11 at the World Trade Center. So it's been a war on terrorism ever since 2001, right? So I became an interrogator. And then I decided from interrogation, I wanted to do something else in intelligence. I wanted to be what was called a counterintelligence special agent. So we all know what special agents are, right? We see them on TV. All these super smart guys who pack weapons, who go out and catch bad guys, right? Right? Those are agents, special agents. Well, I was a special agent in the Army. I was a counterintelligence. So what's counterintelligence mean? Well, we have intelligence guys. They got intelligence guys. Am I right? Just like we want to know what's on their side, they want to know what's going on with us. So they use all the same tricks that we use. A counterintelligence guy tries to capture their intelligence guys. It's like cat and mouse. So I was a counterintelligence special agent. So then in 1991, the guy who was the leader of Iraq at the time decided to invade another country. So we got two questions. Who was the leader of Iraq in 91?
No, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Saddam Hussein. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Say it like you know it.
Saddam Hussein.
Don't say like a question. Saddam Hussein? Saddam Hussein. Right. Saddam Hussein decided to invade another country, which was? Come on, you're like 0 for 9 so far. No, I'm only fooling. No, he decided to invade a little oil-rich country called Kuwait. Now, he had tons of oil. Why he decided to invade an oil-rich country is beyond me. So we sent troops to the desert. President Bush, who was the father of George Bush II, President Bush decided to send troops over to the desert in Operation Desert Shield. They waited until about February of '91 when I went over. Around that time, they decided a coalition of forces of U.S. and other forces would push the Iraqi soldiers out of Kuwait and send them running back to Iraq. So that was called Operation Desert Storm. You know that, right?
Yeah.
So my job in Desert Storm was to work with another group of people called PSYOPs. PSYOPs is psychological operations. So I worked with PSYOPs in a prison camp. So you guys read about prisoners of war.
Yeah.
I was the guy who ran the prison camp. Well, I didn't run it, but I helped operate it. So I would go into the barbed wire areas and have an interpreter, and I would talk to Iraqi soldiers. And I would get intelligence and information from them, and I would help keep the prison camp organized so that there would be no rioting or escaping or any of this stuff. So I lived in the desert for 3 or 4 months. I worked in 2 different prisoner of war camps in Saudi Arabia, along the Iraqi border. My mission was over when Saddam, I guess he sued for peace. Peace was established, and we released all the prisoners back to Iraq. When the prisoners were gone, they didn't need me anymore, so they took me home. So that was my first deployment in '91. So then, around this time, just earlier, the Army taught me to speak Russian. Because up until, well, it was in the '80s I learned to speak Russian. Because America's biggest enemy was Russia, right? It was the Soviet Union. And that's who we trained to fight. We trained to fight a big, massive land army like the Soviet Union. We didn't train to fight little places, little guerrilla movements like crazy wars like Iraq, like Desert Storm. I mean, we were able to do Desert Storm because that was a sort of a traditional war, but Iraq now and then Afghanistan, the Army wasn't trained for that. It was trained always to fight Russia and a big land army. That ended in '91 when the Soviet Union collapsed. Now we had to retrain, but I had already learned Russian. So, but that was important in case we caught Russian prisoners of war, but we never fought the Russians. So now, in the late '90s, I switched from the Army Reserves. I go over to the National Guard because there was a startup unit in the Guard, in the Military Intelligence Unit, and I went over as a trainer, and I became a section leader of the counterintelligence section. And then in 2001, actually in 2002, we invaded Iraq, right? So I went over with 19 of my fellow guardsmen. I went over to Iraq, and I was there for about a year, 3 months or so in Kuwait, training up in the desert, sandstorms, scorpions, everything. And then I went into Iraq, north of Baghdad, for about 9 months, and I did intelligence missions in Iraq. I did not engage in combat. That was not my role. I did engage in intelligence missions where we would stage raids on houses and farms and find buried weapons. We found lots of ammunition and weapons that the bad guys were using to kill our guys. And I was involved in intelligence efforts to try and recruit people to basically not so much spy, but to give us information. So we did that for about 9 months, and we all returned home. And in 2004, I decided it was time to leave the military. I had been in for 34 years. And so that's when I left. So I left the Guard altogether. I left the military altogether. And yeah, Nelson,
What year?
2004.
2000.
Yeah, I left the military. And my Guard unit is still there. And only they're not in Cambridge anymore. They're someplace out at Devon's, and they're going to go to Hanscom eventually. I also retired from my other job. I worked for the federal government. I retired from them after 39 years. And now I am happily retired, and I'd like to come and talk to you guys. So we still have time. So, any questions? You got a whole front page of questions, I think.
Oh. Yes, we do.
Yeah, so we still got some time before they tell us to move on. Did I go over some areas too lightly? Do you want me to go back to anything? Do you have any particular questions?
Where were you born and when were you born?
Oh, I was born in Chelsea in 1948, but I moved to Boston in 57. And I came to Melrose in 78. I grew up in the North End. So now you've spoken already to another veteran, right? This guy right over here. He was in the Navy. I have a son who was in the Navy also. And he was in the Navy for 6 years. He came out in 2006. My son went to the military language school. He learned Russian. He spent time in Japan. Then he spent 6 months in Iraq, and then he worked on submarines, cruising up along the Arctic Circle, listening in on Russian naval communications. So in the military, by the way, you can join Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. You can be anything you want. If you want to be a trigger puller, you want to be a guns and tanks guy, you can do that. If you want to be a medic, if you want to be a nurse, they'll train you to be that. If you want to be a dental technician, they'll train you for that. If you want to be an optometrist, they'll train you for that. If you want to be a linguist who wants to learn Chinese, do you speak Chinese?
Yeah.
Good for you. Don't lose it. If you want to learn Japanese, they'll teach you Japanese. If you want to learn the language that they speak in Iran, they'll teach you that. What language do they speak in Iran?
Arabic.
Ooh,
Arabic.
wrong.
Aramaic.
Wrong. Good guesses, but not true. They speak Farsi, F-A-R-S-I. They speak some Farsi in Afghanistan, and they speak a language called Dari and Pushtu. All strange languages. If you want to learn Bengali, so you can get around in India, they'll still teach you that. If you want to learn Spanish, they'll teach you that. You can do anything you want in the military. And what they do, though, is that you say, well, I want to be an IT guy, information technology guy. I want to learn to fix computers. They'll train you for that. But first they'll test you to see if you have the aptitude. They're not going to send you to language school if they feel that you don't have the aptitude for learning a language. Am I right? Does that make sense or what?
That makes sense.
So they're not going to send you to tank school to learn how to operate a tank if you don't have the ability to operate a tank. So they're going to test you, they're going to give you an aptitude test. And if you test well on the aptitude test and you can do it, then they're going to send you to that training that you want. If you look to go into the military when you're out of college, or even before college, they'll send you to, you go into the military, when you come out, you'll have the GI Bill, and you can use the GI Bill to pay for college, because college is pretty darn pricey right now, and unless you're super smart and can get a scholarship, you're going to have to get a lot of student loans. But if you go into the active military and pick the branch that you want and pick the subject matter that you want to learn and do, then when you come out, you're trained as a dental technician. You can get a job as a dental. In the meantime, technician, in the meantime, you can use the GI Bill to follow a college degree. A lot of benefits to going in. Now, are there any drawbacks? Yeah, they can send you some places you don't want to go. Right? But that's the way it is. I mean, you know, when you go in, they own you for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, right? You don't own yourself. You follow orders, right? It's a disciplined organization, right? Questions? Oh, Saeed, question. You already asked one. questions, Saeed? You got all these questions over here. Look at that. Oh, yeah. Nelson, anything? Did I gloss over anything? You want to hear more about anything in particular? How about women? Women in the military. When I was in Iraq, I worked with lots of gals who carried carbines, M16s, female machine gunnists. So they're doing virtually everything that we were doing. So, and a woman can do virtually anything in the military that a guy does now. I work with a lot of fine ladies who, and a lot of them were tough ladies too, and who did a good job. Questions? Yes.
What was your rank?
Ah, my rank. Well, I didn't take a lot of baths, so I had a lot of rank odor. No. No, in the beginning, there was no showers. In Desert Storm, we didn't have showers for about 3 months. But no, my rank was Master Sergeant. So let's talk a little bit about rank, because you asked the question, so what does it mean? So in the military, there are officers and there are non-officers. Now, non-officers are called enlisted. So if you're an officer, your rank goes from 01 to 010. 010 is like a 4-star general. 01 is a first lieutenant. If you're enlisted, which I was, your rank is E for enlisted, 1 to 9. I was an E8, second highest enlisted rank in the Army. So if you're a buck sergeant, you're an E5. I was an E8, which is just short of E9, which is sergeant major. When you go in as a recruit, brand new recruit, you go in as an E1. All right. E2 is a private first class. E3 is corporal. E4 is a specialist. E5 through E9 are sergeant ranks. So that was my rank. Does that teach you a little bit more about what rank means?
Yeah.
I think so. Nelson, you got anything for me? Ni hao ma.
I speak Cantonese.
Okay. Ho ho. All right. How do you say thank you in Cantonese?
多謝.
Oh, in Mandarin it's 谢谢.
Yeah, 謝謝.
谢谢.
Yeah.
I know a little bit of languages because I love languages. You guys love languages? Do you speak anything besides English?
I speak French.
You do? How's your French?
It's okay.
That's a beautiful thing if you're able to speak a language. Don't lose it. Study it harder. How about you?
I'm starting to learn Spanish.
Spanish is a good language. You know, it's a beautiful thing, like I said, when you can speak another person's language. Even if you go around thinking, how could I say hello to somebody in their own language? Like, for instance, you see a lot of Haitians. How do you say hello in Haitian? You say, what? Bonjour, just like in French. Bonsoir, comment allez-vous? What?
Salute.
Salud in Spanish. But I mean, how do you say hello in Russian? How do you say privyet? How do you say hello in Vietnamese? If you learn just how to say hello in 4, 5, 6 different languages, it's a beautiful thing. When you see somebody, you say hello to them and they smile. Because you said hello to them in their own language. So just keep that in mind. Learn how to say hello in as many different languages as you can, because it's a beautiful thing and it makes you a better person. More questions? Covered a lot of territory, huh?
Yeah. Let's see.
Did I tell you that when I was in Iraq, I was not involved in any firefights or gunplay or anything of the sort?
Yeah.
I did say that, because that was not my job. That was not my job. That was the job for the trigger pullers. I was not a trigger puller. I was an MI guy, military intelligence guy. Did I see anything? Yeah, I saw explosions. I saw things. Yes, I won't say I didn't, but I won't talk about it. It was not my job. All right. So how do we stop this thing? The red button, you think? No, this button. Let's see. Let me tell you a little bit about one of the best language schools in the world. That's the school my son went to learn to speak Russian. I've been to that school several times, but for different reasons. I didn't go to school there. I learned Russian here. My son went to one of the best language schools in the world. It's called DLI, which is the Defense Language Institute. It's located in Monterey, California. Anybody been to California? Anybody ever hear Monterey?
Yep.
Yeah. How?
Like I heard it was mentioned I heard it was mentioned once. Like my friend used to go there, but I don't. See it
Okay.
anymore.
Anybody ever hear of an author called John Steinbeck? John Steinbeck is one of the premier American authors. He wrote The Grapes of Wrath. No?
I've heard about it.
He wrote Cannery Row. He wrote, I don't know his other stories. Grapes of Wrath, they made it into a movie. It's about the Dust Bowl of America in 1935 when there was a drought and there was huge storms sweeping over the plains states down into Oklahoma and Texas, and it eroded away all of the topsoil, so all the farms went bust, and all of this soil became worthless, and thousands and thousands and thousands of American citizens, they lost their houses because they were foreclosed on, because there was no farming income to pay the mortgages. They packed up their belongings and they went west to California. They were mistreated. They were hungry. They were poor. And Steinbeck wrote a novel all about that whole experience called The Grapes of Wrath. Read it. Write it down. Read it. Get it out of the library for summer reading. You will not regret it. Anyway, Steinbeck wrote about Monterey, Cannery Row, where they did fishing, a lot of fishing, and they canned a lot of fish in Monterey. That Monterey is where the Defense Language Institute is located. It's a beautiful location, high up on a hill, overlooking the harbor. At night, when it's quiet, you can hear the not walruses, the sea dogs, which is like sea lions, barking. Because seals and sea lions, they bark like dogs. You can hear them barking a mile and a half away up the top of the hill at the language school. So my son went to learn Russian, and the course was 63 weeks. You think you just learn Chinese? If you're a Caucasian guy? It ain't that simple, is it? It ain't that simple. You can't learn Chinese.
Yeah.
Very hard. Am I right?
Yeah.
Very hard for a Caucasian guy or a non-Chinese person to learn Chinese.
That is hard.
I'll tell you how hard it is. Because I'm a language guy. The military divides all languages into 4 groupings based on difficulty. So group 1, group 2 languages, group 3 languages, and group 4 languages. Group 1 languages are your easiest languages. What would be your easiest languages to learn?
Spanish, Italian,
French.
French. What's the similarity between Spanish and Italian and French?
Yeah, romance.
They are Romance languages, exactly.
a lot of the same words are there.
They're Romance languages founded on Latin. So they have a common foundation. So the tier, what they call tier, or level 1 languages are your Romance languages, which is Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, which is based on Latin. So and then there's some other minor languages. Those are your easiest languages to learn. Tier 2 languages, which is the next step up in difficulty, would be German, Dutch, and a whole bunch of others. Those are your second most difficult. Tier 3 languages are your third most difficult languages. Russian is in tier 3, and you know where I'm going with Chinese. Russian is in tier 3, so is Vietnamese. Even though it's an Asian language, it's still considered a tier 3 language. Tier 4 level, and tier is spelled T-I-E-R, and it means level. Tier 4, level 4 languages are your most difficult. They would be Chinese. They would be Arabic. They would be Farsi, which is the language of what?
What? Cantonese and
No. Farsi is the language of, I told you earlier, you didn't remember. Where's your memory comprehension?
Arabia?
Iran. Yeah. So tier 4 languages are your most difficult. And so therefore, tier 4 languages require the most time at the language school. So you can go in for, if the Army, the Navy, or whatever, you say, I want to learn Turkish. It's probably a tier 3 language. I want to learn Turkish. Why? I don't know, but you want to learn Turkish. Well, if they have a need for you to learn Turkish, and if you take the aptitude test and you pass it, they'll teach you Turkish in Monterey. It's one of the most glorious places in the world to be. It's sunny, it's warm, you're high on a hill, you're overlooking Monterey Harbor, you can hear the sea dogs barking at night, you might get some time off on Saturdays or Sundays, you can walk down the hill into the town. So much beautiful stuff out there to see. So my boy graduated from the language school after 63 weeks. Then they sent him to intelligence school in Texas, where he had to learn his intelligence trade. Now, he was not an interrogator like me. He was not a counterintelligence guy like me. He was something called a CTT, crypto, techno, something. And basically, his job was to put on headphones, and listen to Russian radio communications. So then they sent him to intelligence school. My son was in training for just about 2 full years. 2 years to train. That's what he chose to be in the military. If you want to choose to be a baker, which they don't think they do that anymore, you could probably become a baker in 10 weeks. But my son, it took him 52 weeks times 2 is, what is that? Close to 104 weeks to learn his trade before they sent him out to do his thing. So that's a little briefing on languages. How many levels of difficulty of languages are there according to the military? Bingo! And what's German is in what level?
3.
2. Russian is in
3.
3. Spanish is in,
1.
I'll give you another shot. Chinese is in,
4.
got it.